Simply Cooking by MmmChef is brought to you in part by Orleans Physiotherapy, specializing in a wide range of physical rehabilitation services, including acupuncture, cupping, and more. Orleans Physiotherapy, keeping your family moving since 1990.
This program was recorded on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation.
Does your grandma's baking usually give you a sugar rush? Well, join me where I show you how you can enjoy all the delicious sweetness with new and exciting ingredients. Today I'm going to be doing some traditional baking in a non-traditional way. I love sweets and I'm sure you do too. I'm going to be doing my famous chocolate quinoa cupcakes, my oh so delicious and tart lemon cream pie, and my yummy chocolate chip banana oat cookies. All of the recipes that I'm going to be doing today are gluten-free and dairy-free. I will be using eggs, but I'll also be talking about swaps in the traditional MmmChef way. I'm going to be starting with my pie crust because I want to get that together and get it into the oven. Then I'm going to move on to making my quinoa batter, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So first, for my pie crust, I have a bowl here and a lovely pie plate. You could do individual ones in a little ramekin or in little smaller ones, but I'm going to do a big full size today. I've got some unsweetened shredded coconut. I'll put that in the bottom. I don't really do measurements, as you guys know. We have shredded coconut and we have ground flax seeds. Probably about a cup of shredded coconut and about half a cup of ground flax seeds. A little bit of vanilla extract. And here's my coconut oil and my maple syrup for sweetness. I want a binder. I want this to stick together because unlike a traditional crust that's made with flour, this is pretty loose and it'll just kind of fall apart. So I'm using what you would call like a graham cracker crust procedure. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that, where you can get graham cracker crust and it's crumbled cookies that are kind of pressed together with butter. This is kind of the same concept, but we're using coconut oil and maple syrup instead. So I just like to pinch it between my fingers and just keep pinching and pinching and pinching. So I grew up with two grandmas, and for the age I am now, they're both still around, and I am so blessed to have them. And I grew up with the best of both worlds. My Italian nonna, which I'm sure you've heard lots about, has taught me everything about savory cooking and traditional eating in the European and Mediterranean way. But my grandma Jackie, my Canadian grandma, she's the baker, and she's the one who taught me all of my sweet tips and tricks. And so many of my famous recipes came from an adaptation, of what she's taught me. Oh, look, it's perfectly together. This is the texture I'm looking for. I'm looking to push it into a ball and it actually holds. That's exactly what I want. So I'm gonna pull my pie crust over and get this into my pie crust, and I'm pushing it out. You wanna know a trick for this? If you get your hands wet just a little bit, and your fingers are wet, it doesn't stick as much and you can actually push it out much nicer. So this is a pre-baked crust. This is going to be baked in the oven at 350 for probably about 20 minutes, just until it gets a little bit golden brown and all of these flakes stick together because we want it to hold. Then I'm gonna take it out and let it cool, and that's when I'll make the filling. The filling doesn't need to be baked for this one, it's a raw filling. Traditional lemon cream pies are usually made with an egg custard or whipping cream or something like that. But today we're making my gluten-free, dairy-free version. So we're using cashews as our cream base and lots of fresh lemon and fresh lemon zest. Perfect, look at that. Give my hands a quick wash here. Okay, and now we're gonna move on to the quinoa cupcakes. What's neat about this recipe is I had seen a video of something about it a long time ago, but I never tried it. And then I was working with a client and I had made way too much quinoa. So I remembered this recipe and thought I would give it a try, and I did, but I kind of made it up on my own. And it worked, and I was so pleased. So I have some cooked quinoa that's cooled, it's left over from the other day. It's about 3 cups. I'm gonna get this into the bottom of my blender. You could use a hand stick blender if you don't have a blender like this. you would just want to put it into a cylinder shape like this so that you could use your blender like that. All right, along with this quinoa, I'm going to put in some cocoa powder. I've got 1 cup of cocoa powder here to 3 cups of quinoa. A tiny pinch of baking powder. Some more vanilla, because you can't have baked goods without vanilla. And eggs. I'm going to use 3 eggs today. Oops. 1, 2. I'm actually faster with 1 hand. Strange enough. 3. And about ½ a cup of maple syrup. What's great about this is that it can be used to make cupcakes, which you're going to see later, but you could also pour it into a round cake pan, or you could pour it into a rectangle cake pan and make brownies or a layered cake. You can also make it a little bit runnier than what I'm going to make it today, and you could actually make yourself some double chocolate pancakes for a decadent breakfast one day. This needs a little bit more wetness, so I'm going to add probably about a ¼ cup of maple. I already did the maple, of some coconut cream. This is really thick and fatty coconut cream, so I don't add any oil, I just use the coconut cream. If you were using regular milk, you would use some milk and then maybe a spoonful of coconut oil as well, so that you can get a little bit of fat into that. All right, so this is going to go on the blender, and I'm going to give it a nice blend. Then, but after it's blended, I'm going to add in these mini chocolate chips, because who doesn't love a double chocolate cupcake? And I've got some chopped walnuts that are going to go on top after the break. I've got my oven set at 350. I'm going to get this in the oven, but first I'm going to blend this, and we'll see you after the break.
This program is brought to you in part by Orleans Physiotherapy, providing treatments as well as education to promote healthy and active living. Orleans Physiotherapy, keeping your family moving since 1990.
I blended my cupcake batter on the break. It is really nice and thick and ready to go into my cupcake molds. And I took my pie crust out of the oven. It's just behind me cooling. It's nice and brown and crispy, exactly what I was looking for. So my quinoa cupcakes, I'm gonna get them into these liners here. I'm using silicone liners. A lot of people don't have these, so if you don't, you can use paper liners. When I'm using paper liners for gluten-free stuff, I always make sure to spray or oil the paper liners, because gluten-free stuff tends to stick a little bit more, which is why I really like to use silicone liners for gluten-free stuff. Quinoa is full of protein and it's not a grain. So some people who eat gluten-free, they still eat grains, but there's some people who can't have grains. So quinoa would be a wonderful alternative for people who are trying to stay away from grains, and also a wonderful way to up your protein. So the protein count in these muffins is probably, cupcakes rather, is probably going to be maybe even double what a regular flour cupcake might be. So you don't have to feel so bad about the little bit of sugar that you're getting, because when you pair protein and carbohydrates, it keeps you fuller longer than if it was just carbs. All right, I've got 3 more to fill. That one's gonna be a big cupcake. So that batter makes pretty much exactly 12 cupcakes. And I wanted to make 13, but I don't think I'm gonna get enough batter. But the reason I wanted to make 13, because I wanted to show you that with the silicone liners, you also don't actually need a muffin tin. So if you have a little tiny kitchen, I did once, you can actually save space by not having a muffin tin at all. You can just have silicone liners, and they sit right on a pan. They sit nice and straight, so you could actually just bake them on a regular baking sheet without having to have a muffin tin. I'm gonna set these behind me so that I can grab the stuff that I need to make my cookies, and I'm gonna bake both the muffins and the cookies at the same time at the same temperature. I've got my famous banana cookies. These are another one of those accidental recipes that I came up with. I have some chocolate on my fingers. Get rid of that. All right. So everyone loves chocolate chip cookies and everyone loves chocolate chip banana bread. And one day I was craving that flavor and I didn't have the ingredients to make bread or the pan. I don't even remember what it was, but somehow I made the beginnings of a batter to make a banana loaf. And then instead I added quick oats and it was too thick to bake like a loaf. So I formed them into little balls and put them on a parchment lined pan and baked them like cookies, and they turned out to be so delicious. And a few years later now, they're probably one of my most requested cookies. So I've got 3 bananas here in the bottom of my bowl. I'm using a whisk to mush them up, but you could use a potato masher or a fork or just your hands. Sometimes I do that. I actually will just squeeze the banana. If you have really old bananas that are nice and black, you can squeeze them right inside the peel before you peel back. And then when you peel it back and plop them into the bowl, you don't even have to mush them up at all. All right, so earlier I was talking about egg swaps. This is one of those places that I'm going to do that. I used eggs in my cupcakes. And I could use egg in these cookies, which I have before. So at this point, you would add 2 eggs to this banana. But I'm going to show you how to use an alternative for eggs. So I have these ground flax seeds here. Flax seeds are full of fiber, full of protein, and super full of healthy omega fatty acids. They're one of the only natural foods that's not seafood that has omegas in it. So when you get an omega-enriched egg, it's actually because those chickens were fed flax seeds. Neat tip. Or neat info. So I have 2 tablespoons of flaxseed in here, which equals 1 egg. And for every tablespoon of the ground flax, you use 3 tablespoons of water. And the same goes for chia. So if you don't have any flax seeds at home, but you're someone who loves chia seeds or loves chia pudding, you could use those instead. I would just grind them up in a mortar and pestle or put them in the blender so that they were nice and ground up. So I'm going to mix this here and actually set this to the side, and it's going to thicken up and turn kind of gummy, kind of like an egg. So I've got my bananas. They're all ready to go. Now I'm going to add maple syrup, about ½ a cup of maple syrup. Again, you can use whatever sweetener you like. I love maple syrup. It's one of my favorites, but I've done the same recipe with honey or agave. You can also use coconut sugar or even molasses, but they just would get really, really dark in color, but they would be full of iron. The reason that I like to use alternative sugars to the regular white sugar is because it bumps up the nutrition. The amber color in this maple syrup actually has nutrients and vitamins in it. And so when you're enjoying a baked good, unlike the traditional white sugar baked goods, you actually also get some nutrients in there with it. So it's a great way to sneak in extra nutrition when you're baking sweet things for your kids. Okay, so I have my banana mashed up with my maple syrup. I'm going to add just a little bit of vanilla because we always need vanilla. I'm going to add a little bit of coconut cream, probably about ¼ cup. You can get these recipes online after the show airs. And I have about ½ a cup of melted coconut oil. I melted this earlier. You could use liquid oil. So if you had another flavorless oil, you could use that. I've even actually in a pinch used olive oil. You can't even tell. I just add extra chocolate chips and you can't taste it at all. And give that a nice mix there. And now I'm going to add in my cookie. So these are quick oats. If you had large flake oats, they would work as well. You would just have to have your batter sit to the side for a while. What's great about the quick oats is it absorbs the liquid really, really fast, and there's not very much waiting. So with the traditional oats, I would mix the batter like I'm doing right now, and then I would actually sit the batter aside for probably a good 20 minutes because I would want all of the liquid to absorb inside of the oats. What's great about these, like I said, is it absorbs it quickly for you. So now we have the flax egg. In real time, it would be like 3 minutes, but as you guys saw, it wasn't that much, but we'll just pretend. It gets kind of goopy, so you can see the flax itself is now kind of goopy, like an egg would be. And it will continue to absorb liquid, and it will continue to help it hold together. So for this batter, it's a little bit more wet than a traditional cookie batter. Because it doesn't have real flour in it, they don't rise like a real cookie made with flour would rise. So I like to make them a little bit gummier because this way they'll get crispy on the outside and still be nice and gooey and soft in the inside. I have some baking powder. Always like to add just a little tiny bit. And my big chocolate chunks. These are natural chocolate chips. They're just made with cocoa mass and cocoa powder and raw natural sugar. You can find them at your regular grocery store, and they're comparable in price to the ones that you would get normally, but they actually are so packed full with more nutrition, and they're much better for you. All right, so I've got those in there. Oh my goodness, I totally forgot. My mini chocolate chips and my walnuts are actually for my cupcakes, so I can't forget that. Who doesn't love walnut flavor, like brownie walnut flavor? You can mix these in right with the batter, but of course I forgot, so I'm just putting them on top right now. And I'm gonna leave 3 with no walnuts because my hubby does not like walnuts and chocolate, but everyone else here, the camera crew and myself, we all love the walnuts and the chocolate. All right, and you want to see my trick? If I just shake the chocolate chips, they actually will end up stuck back into the little cups. So if you have chocolate chips that are flying all over the pan, just shake it and they'll get back to where they're supposed to be. All right, I've got my pan lined with parchment here for my cookies. At this point, you could add other things. You could add walnuts. You could add chopped pecans or almonds. You could add even some extract. I've done it with hazelnut extract, and then you have like chocolate chip banana hazelnut oat cookies. This has already pulled together really nicely. I've got my scooper here. If you don't have a scooper, you can use your hands. You can use a 1/4 or a 1/3 cup measuring cup, and you just plop them right onto your pan like that. See, they're a little bit wet, and that is something that you don't usually see with cookies. So these cookies will bake in the oven at 350 for about 26 minutes, a little bit longer than what you're used to for regular cookies, and that's because they're very wet and we want the oats to have time to soak up and also crisp up on the outside. And for the quinoa cupcakes, again, unlike regular cupcakes that might take 18 to 20 minutes to bake, they're also going to take about 26 to 30 minutes because they don't have traditional flour and they need a little bit more time to dry out. And this one has 13, a perfect baker's dozen. Look at that. I'm going to get these both in the oven at the same time and get my timer on for 26 minutes. I'm going to put a toothpick through my cupcakes, just like a traditional cupcake, to make sure that it comes out clean before I take them out. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to make the filling for my tart lemon pie, and we're going to get that together. We'll see you soon. I took my cookies and my chocolate quinoa muffins out of the oven. They're really hot, so I'm just gonna let them cool there behind me while I work on the filling for my zippy lemon cream pie. So I have the beautiful crust that I baked earlier. It's nice and crispy, it's completely cooled, and it's ready for my filling. What I'm using to hold my filling together is actually something called gelatin. It's a powder, and it's something that we add a little bit of water to, and it will hold things together. It's another one of those great tricks for a replacement for eggs. It is a really quick thing though, because you have to work with it really quickly, otherwise it will gel up really fast. It's what makes Jell-O Jell-O. So I've got 2 spoonfuls here of this, and for each spoonful, I add 3 spoonfuls of water. I'm gonna have to eyeball it because my spoon is not the same spoon I used. All good. So I stir that and I kind of just set it to the side and let it gel up, and I'll show you in a minute it will get really, really jelly. Okay, So this lemon cream pie is dairy-free and gluten-free, but you don't miss the creaminess at all. The trick that I use for that is I use cashews. So cashews are a great alternative for cream. I use them to make Alfredo sauce and cream sauce. You can use them to make creamy dressings and dips, and you can use them as a replacement for cream filling for desserts. So I have these cashews. I soak them overnight in some water. This way they got nice and soft and they'll blend easier. And all I did was strain them really well and rinse them really well. So I'm adding these cashews to the bottom of my blender. Now I have a high power blender here, and it really works best with a really high powered blender. If you don't have a high powered blender, I suggest you simmer your cashews or soak them much longer, and that way they'll soften up and you'll get the smooth texture that I'm looking for. I have the juice of 2 lemons here. I'm gonna pour that in. A little splash of vanilla. And we need a little sweetness to offset that super, super sour tartness. So I have almost half a cup of maple syrup here. I think it's just shy of half a cup. At this point, you could use, again, whatever sweetener you prefer. You could use honey or agave. If you are diabetic or you're trying to watch your carbs, you could use stevia as well. Okay, then to that, I'm going to add just a little spoonful of coconut cream just to give it that little bit of creaminess. And look at this, actually. I'm gonna show you this right now. Do you see the little pieces of gelatin that are kind of like now turning into Jell-O and getting all gooey? That's exactly what we're looking for. That's going to really tighten up this filling. I'm gonna actually put this in the blender, but that means that I have to work really quickly because this jelly is going to gel up fast. And then just a dollop, probably about half a cup of coconut cream. This is another one of those eyeballer recipes that I kind of invented, but you can find the recipe online after the show airs. Put my lid on. This is gonna be real fast. All right, that was real fast. Check that smoothness out. It's nice and smooth. It's kind of runny. So what happens is this pie actually has to set in the fridge. Sometimes it will set right away, but I think because of the pressure of being on TV, it will have to go in the fridge. But you can already see that it's starting to gel up really nicely. And as soon as it cools completely, it will become a gelatinous mass, and then you'll be able to cut through it really nicely. This I love to top with some raspberries. I like to actually get the raspberries right in because then they kind of live inside the cream. It looks great. And some fresh mint just for the color because isn't that beautiful? All right, so I've got my cookies here that we baked for 26 minutes. See, they're nice and golden brown on the bottom, and they're really, really soft and gooey inside. That's what I'm looking for. I've got cookies, and then same with my cupcakes. My cupcakes came out of the oven, and they are cooked all the way through. See how cool this is with the silicone cups? It pops right out. It doesn't really leave a mess, and you can throw these in the dishwasher. And check this out. It's quinoa, but it looks just like a regular chocolate cake. Has the texture, it's soft and gooey and fudgy. I think this is the one I'm gonna have to taste. It's really hot, but sweet, soft, chocolatey, delectable, and simple. Join me next time.